Hi everyone, it's Robin and welcome back to Happy at Home. Today I'd like to share with you two different ways that I use paint to transform either a new piece of wood or some project that I want to make look old. So I really enjoy the look of chippy paint that has like a dark base coat that comes through, and there are two different ways that I use time and time again to achieve that look, either on something new that I've made or something that I want to transform that I found from the thrift store. The first technique that I use, which is my favorite, is a scraping technique. And the second technique is crackling using Elmer's glue. So today I'm going to show you very quickly how easy it is to use both of these techniques to make a project look like it's been around for ages. So let's go ahead and get started. To get started, give your project a base coat of paint. I chose to use a black, and I'm using a 1x4 board as an example. Then choose a top coat. I'm using a semi-gloss creamy white paint from Pittsburgh Paints, which I've had for a long time and trying to use up. You'll also want a small paintbrush and then a paint scraper. This one I've had for a really long time. It's looking kind of rough, but it works perfectly. And then you'll also want some sort of paper towel or rag in order to wipe the paint off your scraper. Next comes the fun part. With just a small amount of paint on your paintbrush at a time, spread it around on your project. Doesn't have to be too precise, but kind of even. Then take your scraper and lightly run it across the surface of your project. And you can see how it takes off a thin layer of the paint. Then move to the next section of your project and repeat the process. It's a good idea to wipe the scraper off after each row of scraping. That way the paint doesn't build up on the scraper and end up on your project where you don't want it. I sometimes forget to do this myself. After one coat of paint, this is how your project should be looking. Of course, it depends on the texture of the project that you're working on also. If you'd like less of the background color showing through, just give it another coat and repeat the process of adding paint and scraping it off until you have the desired look that you want. So here you can see this side has 3 coats of paint and this side only has 1, so there's a little bit of difference between the two, and you can keep adding layers and layers, or you can allow the layers of paint to dry a little bit before you scrape, and that will take off less of the paint. Then what I like to do once the paint is dried is give the edges just a little bit of a sanding just to give it a little more natural, rustic look. So that is how I get a rustic paint finish using a scraper. It's very easy to do and quite enjoyable, and I use this white and black combo quite a bit and I love it. I've used the scraping technique to make this wooden display runner, which I've used all over the house, but right now it's sitting on my living room table and I think it is absolutely beautiful. I've also used the same technique on this hook rack that I have hanging in my bedroom. This technique is a quick and easy way to make things look old and worn, so I encourage you to give it a try. First, you'll need some Elmer's glue. This is a ginormous container that I swiped from my daughter, which she uses to make slime. Then you're going to need some sort of container to paint, and paint the whole thing in a base color. For my base color, I chose this Lamp Black by Americana, and it's just an acrylic paint. Next, you're going to take your glue, and with a paintbrush, you're going to cover the whole surface of your project. Now, the thicker you apply the glue, the bigger the crackles are going to be. So just keep that in mind. If you only want small crackles, kind of have sort of a thin layer, but if you like nice big chunky crackles, a nice thick layer of glue is what you're going to need. On this particular project, I probably went somewhere in between thick and thin, so I wish I would have gone a little thicker with the glue. Once you have all the glue applied, allow it to dry completely before you move to the next step. Next, it's time to apply the top coat. I chose this folk art acrylic paint in the color Vintage White. Then, using your paintbrush, start applying a rather thick layer of paint. As you're painting, you need to make sure that you try not to overlap the paint very much. If you start to overlap it after the paint has been sitting there for a while, it's going to start taking the paint off and you're not going to get as good of a crackle finish. So just kind of work quickly and slap some paint on there and you're good to go. Here's a quick time lapse of the crackling taking place. It doesn't show up as well on camera as it did in real life, but you get the idea. When the paint is almost dry, I like to take my finger and take chunks out of the paint. I do this in areas where the crackling didn't work as well, and it just kind of helps give the overall just weathered look to the piece. I also will take my fingernail and run it along the edges so that the base coat will shine through. Then once I know the paint is completely dried, I will take my sandpaper and run it along the edges of the item and anywhere else I want to distress a little bit more, especially on those areas where the paint is a little thinner and it didn't crackle. I think adding this little step into the mix makes a big impact on the overall look of the piece. It gives me that nice, authentic looking worn wood look that I love so much. So the crackling turned out fairly well, and I love how it looks. I placed it in my windowsill in my kitchen, and I think it looks fabulous with this plant from IKEA in it. So that's it for today. I'll see you soon, and happy painting!